Stop looking at the stock market. Stop looking at the unemployment rate. Those are the distractions. Look at the one number they are terrified to show you on the evening news. What if I told you that the United States government is no longer borrowing money to build bridges, fund schools, or even fight wars? What if I told you that for the first time in history, the world's superpower is borrowing money solely to pay the credit card interest on the money it already spent? This isn't a theory, this is math, and the math says we have crossed the event horizon. You feel it, don't you? You feel it every time you walk into a grocery store and pay $100 for 2 bags of food. You feel it when you look at house prices and realize the American dream has become a mathematical impossibility for your children. They tell you it's supply chain issues. They tell you it's corporate greed. They are lying. The truth is much darker. We have entered a financial death spiral. The system is eating itself alive. To keep the lights on, the machine must print currency at a rate that guarantees the destruction of your purchasing power. We are witnessing the mathematical endgame of a 50-year experiment in paper money. Before we expose the secret mechanism driving this collapse, I want to know who is awake out there. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. Let's see how global this awakening really is. And if you want the unfiltered truth that Wall Street won't touch, smash that subscribe button right now. We are peeling back the layers of the greatest illusion in human history. To understand why the $35 trillion number matters, we have to look back at the only other civilizations arrogant enough to think they could defy gravity. Let's talk about Rome. In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire faced a crisis. They had overextended borders, a massive military budget they couldn't afford, and a populace addicted to bread and circuses, free food and entertainment provided by the state. To pay for it all, Emperor Diocletian didn't cut spending. No politician ever does. Instead, he debased the currency. He took the silver denarius coin, melted it down, mixed it with cheap copper, and reissued it. Suddenly, the government had more money to pay its soldiers, but the coins were worthless. Merchants demanded more coins for the same wheat. Prices skyrocketed. The middle class was wiped out. The empire didn't collapse because of barbarians at the gate. It collapsed because the money died from the inside out. Sound familiar? Fast forward to Weimar Germany, 1923. The government had massive war debts it could not pay. So the Reichsbank began printing marks to buy government bonds. At first, it created a false boom. The stock market soared in nominal terms. Everyone felt rich. But the reality of the math was lurking beneath the surface. Soon, people were bringing wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread. The currency wasn't money anymore. It was confetti. Sound familiar? Now look at the United States in 2024. We don't clip coins, and we don't use wheelbarrows, yet. We use digital ledgers, we use quantitative easing, but the mechanism is exactly the same. Since 1971, when President Nixon severed the last link between the US dollar and gold, we have been living in a fantasy. We have been operating on a pure fiat system, money backed by nothing but faith. For 50 years, the US enjoyed a privilege no other nation had. We could print the world's reserve currency. We could export our inflation to other countries. We could run deficits without consequence because the world had to buy our debt. But that era is over. Just like Rome, we have overextended our military. Just like Weimar, we have massive unfunded liabilities, Social Security and Medicare, that are mathematically impossible to pay. And just like both, our leaders are choosing the path of least resistance, dilution. In 2008, during the global financial crisis, the Federal Reserve printed more money in a few months than it had in the previous century. They told us it was a temporary emergency measure. Sound familiar? Temporary became permanent. The emergency never ended. They addicted the economy to cheap money, and now the bill has come due. The debt has exploded from $10 trillion in 2008 to over $35 trillion today. But here is the terrifying difference between then and now.
Interest rates. For a decade, rates were at zero. The debt didn't matter because it cost nothing to service. It was free money. But when inflation, the inevitable consequence of printing, finally exploded in 2022, the Fed was forced to raise rates. Now, that $35 trillion debt isn't free anymore. It is a noose around the neck of the economy. The parallels to Rome and Weimar are no longer metaphors. They are a roadmap, and we are speeding toward the cliff edge.
But wait, if the situation is so obvious, why hasn't it collapsed yet? Why is the stock market at all-time highs? Why are people still buying houses? Here is the twist. The system hasn't collapsed because it's been rigged to hide the collapse. The official story is that the Federal Reserve is an independent body fighting to keep prices stable. That is a lie. The Federal Reserve has been captured. It is now trapped in a mechanism called fiscal dominance. This is the point of no return. Fiscal dominance happens when the government's debt is so massive that the central bank loses the ability to control monetary policy. They can't raise rates to fight inflation because if they do, the interest payments on the government debt will bankrupt the Treasury. But if they don't raise rates, inflation destroys the currency. They are trapped in a room with no doors. So they invented a back door, a secret plumbing system known as the Shadow Banking Repo Market. You see, usually when the government needs money, they sell treasury bonds to you, to pension funds, to China or Japan. But recently, something terrifying happened. The world stopped buying. China is dumping U.S. debt. Japan is selling. So who is buying the debt to keep the U.S. government open? The mechanism involves the reverse repo facility, a place where excess cash from the banking system is parked overnight at the Fed. They are essentially recycling liquidity to create the illusion of demand. They are using accounting tricks to monetize the debt without officially calling it printing. It's a shell game, a sophisticated magic trick designed to keep you looking at the left hand while the right hand steals your wallet. Who is the architect of this? It's not one person. It's a systemic reliance on a theory that says debt doesn't matter as long as you control the printing press. But there is a receipt for this magic trick, a cost that must be paid, and the receipt is wilder than you think. It's not just a number on a screen. The cost is the permanent destruction of the American middle class. Let's strip away the jargon and look at the raw, bleeding mechanics of this death spiral. We need to dissect the fiscal dominance feedback loop. This is the engine of the collapse. It works in 4 distinct, agonizing stages. Stage 1, the interest rate trap. As of right now, the U.S. government pays over $1 trillion per year just in interest expenses on the national debt. Let that number sink in. $1 trillion. That is more than the entire U.S. defense budget. That is more than the budget for Medicare. That is more than the GDP of most nations on Earth. We are spending more to pay the past lenders than we are spending to defend the country today. This creates a deficit. The government takes in tax revenue, but it's not enough, so they have to borrow more. Stage 2, the issuance tsunami. To pay that $1 trillion in interest, the Treasury must issue new bonds. Think of this like paying your Visa bill by using your MasterCard. But because they are issuing so much new debt, the supply of bonds floods the market. Basic economics. When supply goes up, price goes down. When bond prices go down, interest rates go up. This pushes the interest expense even higher. The $1 trillion becomes $1.5 trillion, then $2 trillion. This is the mathematical definition of a death spiral. The more they borrow, the higher the rates go, which forces them to borrow even more. Stage 3, the buyer strike. This is where the numbers get shocking. In 2013, foreign nations held about 33% of U.S. debt. Today, that number has dropped below 23%. The world is walking away. The U.S. debt to GDP ratio has crossed 122%. Historically, any nation that crosses 130% eventually defaults. We are inches away from the red line. In just the last 4 years, the U.S. money supply, M2, exploded by 40%. That is 40% of all dollars in existence created since 2020. When there are no real buyers for this debt, the Federal Reserve must step in. They become the buyer of last resort. They print digital dollars to buy the bonds to keep the government solvent. Stage 4. Financial repression, the soft default. This is the most critical part of the deep dive. This is the big reveal. The government knows it cannot pay back $35 trillion. It is mathematically impossible. There are only 2 ways out. Option A, hard default. Tell the world, we aren't paying. This causes an instant global depression, banking collapse, and chaos. No politician will choose this. Option B, soft default. This is what is happening right now. It is called financial repression. They will keep interest rates below the real rate of inflation. Let's say inflation is really 8%, not the fake CPI number they tell you, but the real cost of living. And let's say they keep interest rates at 5%. That means every year, the real value of the debt decreases by 3%. It sounds good for the government, right? But who pays for it? You do. This is parasitic finance. By keeping inflation higher than your savings rate, they are transferring wealth from savers to debtors. If you have $10,000 in the bank and inflation is 10%, next year, that money only buys $9,000 worth of goods. The government effectively taxed you $1,000 without passing a law. This is engineered collapse. They are intentionally destroying the value of the currency to wipe out the value of the debt. Consider this statistic. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the U.S. dollar has lost over 98% of its purchasing power. A dollar today is worth 2 cents in 1913 terms. The $35 trillion death spiral is simply the final acceleration of this process. And it gets worse. We haven't even talked about the derivatives market. The exposure in the global derivatives market, bets on bets on bets, is estimated at over $1 quadrillion. That is 1,000 trillion. This creates a moral hazard of epic proportions. The banks know the system is fragile. They know that if interest rates spike too fast, this $1 quadrillion bubble pops. So they force the Fed to print. The system is held together by illusion and greed. It is a Ponzi scheme where the new investors are the taxpayers of the future, and the early investors cashing out are the corporate elite who get access to the printed money first. The Cantillon effect. By the time that money reaches your wages, prices have already risen. You are running on a treadmill that is speeding up while the ground beneath you crumbles. The mechanism is designed to fail. The collapse isn't a bug, it's a feature. It is the liquidation of the middle class to save the sovereign state.
We are living on borrowed time, literally. The modern system is faster, more interconnected, and more leveraged than Rome or Weimar ever were. When this bubble finally bursts, or when the soft default grinds our standard of living down to nothing, there will be nowhere to hide. This is a global synchronization of debt. Europe, Japan, China, they are all in the same trap. But the greatest danger isn't the debt itself. The greatest danger is denial. It is the belief that it can't happen here. It is the trust in institutions that have proven, mathematically, that they are working against you. Trusting the Federal Reserve to save your wealth is like trusting the arsonist to put out the fire. They are the ones holding the matches. This analysis wasn't meant to scare you. It was meant to arm you. You cannot fix the system. The machine is too big. The momentum is too strong. But you can fix your position within it. You can step out of the illusion. You can refuse to hold your life energy in a currency they are actively destroying. History shows us that every fiat currency eventually returns to its intrinsic value, zero. The $35 trillion spiral is just the countdown clock. The question you have to ask yourself tonight is simple. Are we wiser now, or are we just walking the same path as Rome, wearing better suits? If you refuse to be a victim of this financial engineering, if you want to understand how to protect what you build, you need to be part of this community. Share this video with someone who is still asleep. Wake them up. Subscribe now, because the unfiltered truth is the only currency that doesn't inflate. I'll see you on the other side of the crash.